back at the sewing machine. All we have to do now on this little top are the hem the cuffs and hem the bottom of it. I've turned it inside out at the moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run a zigzag stitch around the bottom, the very bottom of the cuffs, the sleeves and the bottom of the garment. Okay, just a straightforward zigzag, and I'll be back with you when I've done that. Okay, I'm on the ironing board and I've zigzagged around the cuffs and pressed them. And these, this hem and the hem, I've zigzagged around the hem and pressed it. These have a 2 centimetre turning, and that's why I put a zigzag around them, just to finish that hem off, so that when I turn it, my 2 centimetres, I get a nice flat finish. The reason we're at the ironing board is because these, as you can see, it's for a 2-year-old, it's very small. I am not going to pin and measure this. I'm going to measure the hem, but the sleeves, I'm going to get I have a little gag. If ever you didn't know what this was for, it's for measuring things. They don't work very well, but they're all right for a small tape measure. So I'm going to take my 2 centimetres and I'm going to just pop it in here and make sure I've turned this 2 centimetres. And you can see I'm wriggling it round, okay, to make it flat and the same length. That's why I've got the sleeve flat. I think that's probably about right. And once I've got it stretched and flat and I'm happy with it, I'm going to put the iron on it and press it. Okay? I'm going to do the same on the other sleeve. And notice I have this the right side out. And that's because when we come to stitch them, it is much easier if you do it with the right side out. So again, I'm turning it in. You can see I'm used to turning 1.5 centimetres because that's virtually what I turn every time. But I want it just a little bigger than 1.5, don't we? We want 2 centimetres, that's too much. You get used to this by eye. Now, if you are not very good at eyeing things, use a little measure and you just pop it in and see that's too much there. I think there might be, that's a little bit not quite enough. Give it a stretch. I mean, they do stretch when they go on and off. Be amazed, you're a parent. How often do you stretch it and never think about it? Right, that's about right on that side. And it's about right on that side. So it's nice and flat. I can feel there's a little bump there, but I'm just going to stretch and flatten that. That's it. I'm going to press it. There we go. So they're ready for sewing. Now the hem is slightly different because it's bigger. And it's really difficult across such a, even though it's only small, but across such a width, it is difficult to eye 2 centimetres. So I am going to use pins. I'm going to turn. I'm going to use my measure. And that's 1.5 centimetres spot on. I'm so used to turning 1.5 centimetres, which is a standard seam allowance. Right, that's 2 centimetres there. Obviously, if you'd measured wrong and you wanted a little bit longer for your toddler, turn less, by all means. It doesn't have to be the 2 centimetre it says on the pattern. I'm choosing to do the 2 centimetres because I know that I have measured that much and I can turn that much. So again, I'm just, I've got the camera the wrong way around really, haven't I? I ought to go towards you. There we are. So I'm just checking in between the two, because quite often in between 2 pins you might get a millimetre or 2 extra. So I'm just pinning it up. Okay, I'm going to go to the seam at the other side, match those seams. I want 2 centimetres or thereabouts. Push it back at just that millimetre. Pop my pin in. stretch between the two pins gently. I can see that's not bad. That's about right. So I'm going to pop one in there. So again, it's like when we put the pins in the neckline. I'm doing one in the middle, and then I'm doing one in between the next two, the seam and the middle. But obviously you don't have to have even amounts in here. You can put in as many as you want. You can pop clips on these edges when you've measured them, however you prefer to do it. But on the hem, it definitely needs to have something to secure it before we stitch it. Okay, I'm happy with that. I've just got one more to do on that other side there. Just let's get that measured, 2 centimeters. A little bit more. There we go, I think. Just check that we've got it straight. Pop my pin in, 2 centimeters. And then we're going to go and sew this. And I'm going to sew this with a straight stitch. You can sew it with a zigzag, and you have a fancy stitch on here, but I'm just going to sew it with a straight stitch. Amazingly enough, it will stretch enough for hems and cuffs. So I'm off over to the sewing machine to stitch this. I'm not going to show you how to stitch the hem, but I am going to show you how to stitch one of the cuffs because they're little. Okay? Okay, I'm on the machine, and as I said, I'm going to use a straight stitch on this, about a 3.5. Now, cuffs are very small. I know nobody likes doing them, whether you're putting a cuff on or whether you're sewing a hem. So we've pressed this hem, if you remember, 2 centimeters. And I'm going to have the right side out and the hem turning to the inside. And I'm going to, because I've pressed it and it's only very small, it'll stay there. I'm going to move my foot across, and I'm going to use the other side. If you remember, I used the hole in the zigzag. I'm going to actually align the edge of the cloth up against the other side for the turn. There's another little gadget that you can put in for a seam guide. This is a seam guide. Okay. On your machines, not just the vintage machines, on your modern machines, they have holes on your bed. And this is what they're for, to put a seam guide and other attachments in. So because I don't want to scratch my machine, I use a little felt with a hole in. I then have the seam guide, which will go this way, and my screw will go through there, like so it can move up and down. You can put it where you want. And I'm going to put it through that hole and screw it in the screw hole it's meant to go in. And I've got my fabric where I want it, so I'm going to put the edge of the seam guide against my fabric. Okay, so that allows me to know I'm not going to go off by a lot. You can't use that just on its own. You can for some things, but I don't advise it. So if we tip this up, you can see I'm going to use the edge of this inner hem against the edge of the slot in the foot, and I'm going to use my seam guide here for the edge, so the bottom edge of the sleeve, just to know that I'm keeping it a nice even distance as I stitch round. Okay, so let's just stitch around this cuff. Now, it's as I said, cuffs are very small, so you need to use like 2 fingers. Okay, you get smaller ones than this. So we've pressed it in place, and I'm just going to place the 2 fingers. I can only fit 2 fingers in, to make sure it's all nice and flat as it goes underneath the feet. And I've got my seam guide, and so I'm going to keep that side against it, so I don't need to watch my needle. I know it's going to catch my hem because that's how I've lined it up. So I've done that little bit. If you keep your fingers flat in front of the foot, your fingers will never go under the needle. So don't be scared, okay? Keep it flat on your bed in front of it and let the fabric gently run underneath your fingers. As the machine takes it, gently feed it round, keeping the hem against the seam guide, or use the line that you're using as a marker if you don't have a seam guide. But I believe they make seam guides now that are magnetic, and you can just put them in place and they stay there. They're a brilliant thing to have. Okay, my tension wanted altering slightly on my machine. I'm just going to do that now, and you'll see why when I show you. I should have done that first because I'd altered it for the zigzag. Right, just going to reverse. There. Now, it's like a funny thing happened on the way to the market. When I do a straight stitch on this stretchy fabric, it seems to sort of stitch stretchy. It's really weird. I don't know why. I don't know whether it's just my machine. But anyway, I've just tightened it because it's actually, you can see now it's stitched, and it's stitched an even amount away from the edge all the way around because of how we've done it. This is my overlap. It's not very pretty, and that's because it's a little bit stretchy. It also needs pressing. Okay, so it's not the best stitch in the world. I'm not happy with that. I should have checked it, as I always say I do, because it's a little off. It just needed that tension tightening up a little bit. But we'll do the other one, and we'll just check that that's going to go better. Because I've got my seam guide in place, I can do exactly the same. Butt it up to my seam guide, and off I go. Okay. Oops, that's a little short. I'm just feeding it round gently as we go, trying not to stretch it, keeping it in place. I think that stitch is much better actually now. Just put you in place there. There we go. I've caught my thread. There we go. That's it. No, I'm not happy with that stitch. But you get the idea. I'm actually going to undo this and redo it, but not on camera. I'll show you why. And this is some of the trials and tribulations. It's stitched beautifully for me for weeks, and now it's really unhappy. You can see here, look. It's not happy. It's stitched lovely on the inside, but this is the underneath thread. It's not happy at the moment. I'm going to have to see to that. So I will take this undone, and I'll show you when I've finished it.